Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, I wanted to, I know I haven't done a ton of just regular videos outside of lives and things like that, but I wanted to just get all the thoughts and summary kind of down of where things are at because, I know that when things are on lives and all spread around and all of that, it's kind of hard to keep up on what's actually being said. And a lot of times as well, things that I present as scenarios, potentials, options get picked up and go around different places, and it can be a little bit confusing. So in today's video, I wanted to kind of summarize everything that I understand as to where things are at right now in a little more specific setting and look at that. And then, probably I'll do a live again tomorrow to kind of go through the chart again, talk about anything new that we've learned in the last couple of weeks, the last 10 days, new names, things like that, because there are a few that we can add. Some that we just forgot to add to that chart before, but some more good names to add to the list, obviously, would be of interest. But let's get into it with the first thing, okay? First and foremost, I want to talk about the Marcus Rashford situation and how this pertains to a few other things as well. So obviously, Rashford's representatives were in Italy yesterday discussing with AC Milan a potential landing spot for him on loan. According to some of the sources in Italy, they proposed to his representatives, I would understand to his representatives in those talks, a loan with an option for summer. Now, obviously, he's going to be discussing with other clubs as well. Dortmund is a new one mentioned. Italy is where I've always heard the most, as I've shared many times. Napoli did make an inquiry, but again, I think that realistically, we can kind of go back to the Osimhen thing in the next section, talk about that. But realistically, it's more likely something for summer that might be relevant for them there when you consider the cost and wages and things like that. But in Italy, there was a number of clubs actually interested as well. I think potentially, Lazio and things like that as well that had made inquiries. There's a number of clubs that had checked in Italy, but obviously AC Milan right now seems like the one that is moving forward most likely in there. And if they have presented an offer with a loan plus option, that's pretty good. Now, the main issue with an option is that when a club is presenting an option for a player like Rashford, essentially what they're probably saying is, we think he's better than his current value, but we want an ability to buy him based on maybe his current play. So, we don't know the value of that option. My guess is it's a little bit low, at least in the first discussion. But if you're putting 25 million forward, essentially their thinking is we're pretty sure he's going to perform better than that, and that's going to give us a potential bargain in there. But at the same time, also big wages. The good part about that point on an option is it gives you that potential to sell, and that they're saying, yeah, we'll take it. We'll give them a new contract that takes care of the wages, and and so it is a good thing that option is on the table for Rashford. If he performs there, if he goes there and he performs, then it gives a very good possibility that it is resolved for summer. That being said, that's just one option, and they don't have to take it, and he doesn't even have to accept it in summer. There may be more clubs that come in if he were to perform between now and then, because remember, the player also has to accept that. So the player can reject the move and just not agree a contract, even with an option to buy in there. I believe anyway, unless that's a part of the loan terms, but I think that's all up in the air compared with the player. But yeah, he'll be in discussions with Dortmund as well. There's English clubs too, but obviously United preferred it not to be in England. But definitely, I think Italy is the most likely landing spot. It has been, and either way, I think it would be a good league for him to perform in. We've seen how former United players have gone there. I mean, players from Ashley Young to Darmian to Lukaku to all of them. A lot of players have gone to Italy and done really well from United, and so I think that that's a good landing spot potentially for him to build up stock in himself again, get back into form and confidence, and that will be good. And I think that would help him in the long term just to make that move. No guarantees yet. We would want a pretty significant size of wages being covered, of course, and a decent loan fee, because ideally it would enable us to make some sort of move, right? For it to be sensible to let him go, but realistically, with the situation being at the moment fairly unresolved, that's likely what's going to happen, and that's likely where we're headed. So I think that this is a very good sign that this is moving forward in the way that we want it to move forward. And I think there's a good chance that he leaves at this point, quite obviously. But we'll have to wait and see. He's got to accept one of those moves and then bring that offer to the club. But as I can gather, and he's still training on his own. I said in the last thing that I did not really think it was about illness or something like that. That's just my opinion. Understandably, that it's just an unresolved situation, and he's essentially available for transfer and looking at his options. And that's all above board. Everybody knows it. Everybody's on the same page that that's what's happening right now. So I believe that his agent, his representative, his brother will bring back some offers to United in the next couple of days, and then they will make that decision as to where he could go and decide if these offers are good enough, maybe have a little more negotiations direct club to club and sort it out. But that's what agents are supposed to do, is go find those offers and bring them to the club. And as I said, there is no shortage there's a lot of clubs interested, even if they all can't afford him right now. There are a lot of clubs interested in Rashford at this point in time, on as it were currently. So I think there's a good chance we can move him on, and obviously financially that would open up a lot for January. Talking about forwards here then, because we clearly need forwards, right? It's a complicated situation. A little over a month ago, it didn't look like we needed a forward in January. We had Rashford, Garnacho, Bruno, Mount, Ahmad, Højlund, Xerxes, all like healthy and playing. That's 7 players for 3 positions. And then Garnacho and Rashford were left out. Mount got injured. The situation with Xerxes is complicated, but he's very likely to stay. I said way back before. It's funny, 2 months ago, there were stories about him wanting to go to Juventus, and I said they're not true. And now, even after everything that's happened, you've seen from Ornstein and others, them saying he wants to stay. He's never wanted to leave. I killed those stories back then for a reason, because they weren't true back then, that he was trying to find a way out, and he's still not. That being said, obviously, it's he's likely to stay during the January window, and then come summer decide what's going to happen there. That's what's around everywhere. That's what everybody's expecting. United can't really afford to keep losing more forwards at the same time, because we cannot necessarily replace all of them in January. But it looked like we didn't need a forward so badly before. Now we, not that we didn't need one eventually, but we were going to adjudicate at the end of the season. But a lot of those judgments have kind of come early. And so United are definitely in a situation where they probably need a forward, regardless of also the other positions that are of need. And we've talked about Samu Agahawa, I think is his name now, right? Osimhen, Delap, Cunha. These are all names United have been linked with that are all very much more likely summer things. If we move on Rashford, maybe others move on as well, and we're looking for a top forward to come in and lead the line. A lot of those are potential options, or not necessarily lead the line in the case of like Cunha, but a top forward that's going to be pricey to come in. Those are all things that are under more consideration for summer, that are players that they have their eyes on. Randall Kolo Muani is somebody United have been interested in for some time, a long time. And he's not getting the minutes. I forgot about this one in the last video, but it has real substance. We've been following him since 2023, but we've been in touch with his representative since October of this year. And so since were in touch back then, and now it's being reported in January, I would believe then, because it's Ornstein who says it, obviously we could believe it, but that adds more to the case of we're kind of definitely interested and kind of pushing ahead with the idea of maybe doing it, and have maintained that contact, right? If we're still talking to him now, 2-3 months later, that we've maintained that contact. And it looks like we could do something with that. And he was one of the major names. We wanted Kane, Osimhen, Ramos, Kolo Muani, and Højlund were like our 5 major names a couple of years ago. And, few of them are probably still on our list right now, like Kolo Muani and Osimhen, for the long term to bring in potentially a striker. We remain interested in Osimhen, but again, it's more likely a summer thing where his loan ends, he's leaving Napoli. Where would he go? And if we move on Rashford and his wages, not only do we have the financial ability to do that, we have the need to bring in someone major to lead the line, and we also have the need to bring in someone who has more of a proven goal scorer, because we have none. And Rashford is still our most proven goal scorer. That's not saying that he shouldn't leave with the situation that's gone on. I think it's best for everybody. But point is, he still is our most proven goal scorer at this point in time. We don't have anybody who is right now otherwise. And so, that would be very, very necessary come summer. So Kolo Muani, my point is, I said something about how we were looking at permanent deals. I stand by that, but it's always important to contextualize things. Kolo Muani is somebody that we liked and we've liked for a long time. The move for him, even if it was at the moment a short-term deal, we would like to do it as almost as a consideration for a player we'd like to buy in the long term. We don't want to loan. My point on the loans is we don't want to bring in, 32-year-olds for 6 months that we just spend the wages on and they're gone, and there's no potential of them staying at the club and helping us solve a problem. We don't want those types of loan deals. We do and are interested in loan deals where we could potentially buy them later on, right? That, okay, yeah, this is like a test run for this player. It's a try before you buy. That's the type of loan deal that they're interested in players that could come in and help in the long term. So Kolo Muani is one where, they rate a lot of the things about him, even though he's not in the best performing state at the moment. But they would consider buying him later on. So I don't know the terms on PSG and all of that, but that would be one of the main reasons that they would consider him as well. But yeah, I at the end of the day, we probably need 2 forwards. And, we've got Højlund, we've got Xerxes, we've got Bruno, and we've got Ahmad right now. Now, Ahmad has agreed to a new contract. Ahmad, we approached for a new contract before summer of last year. It stalled entirely because he was completely unconfident on Erik ten Hag using him and felt that he may not be wanted and likely would leave United. I've shared this before. This is not new news. But when Amorim has come in, used him a lot, and to be fair, Van Nistelrooy as well, right? We can give credit here to Van Nistelrooy, who rated him really highly, and he kind of resurged under Van Nistelrooy. Now he's been open to the new contract, wanting to discuss it, and now has agreed to it and will essentially get it signed and done this week, per the reports that are out there now from ESPN, Fabrizio, all of that. So it's been a long road, but as soon as we sacked Ten Hag, as I shared, he was pretty much open to it, and he was ready to sign there. And that's big because that nails down you probably are only nailed on forward for the next 4 or 5 years, right? That we know is good enough, that is performing, and that is up to the level of expected is Amad Diallo. He's the only one. So we need forwards because Rashford leaving, Mount injured, question marks over Garnacho, which I'll touch on in a moment here. So that is something we probably want to do something on, totally separate to anything else. Is something like Kolo Muani, and there's other options, I'm sure. When we can go back to our list, but we'll want to ideally get somebody, if we can, who we'd be interested in long term as well. So maybe I don't know if there's any wingers, if there's anybody in Portugal, that we could continue to look at here, that would be viable options. But it's difficult to get somebody in. So we can't rule it out yet, but Kolo Muani right now, obviously the main name on everybody's, mouth in terms of potential loan forwards coming in. But in the summer, would definitely remain interested in Osimhen, Samu Agawa. It's been mentioned Dilap, but I think it's really hard to get him if City decide to go for him. And then obviously Cunha, but he may be signing a new deal with Wolves. Either way, they'll all be expensive, but if Rashford goes and we make a sale in summer, that would all be viable. United could do it. They could make that happen at that point in time, and we will need a top forward in one of those positions. We will, to potentially lead the line over Højlund or otherwise. For sure, that is the case. So that's that with forwards in terms of what's important there. So on this loan sale type of business, I like I said, I mentioned on what their considerations are for loaning players, for the considering that they would want to potentially buy them is a lot of the players that would be looking at on loan. But I do want to discuss this whole everyone is for sale thing and really kind of clarify it, because this went, to me, completely spiraled out of control yesterday in terms of the narrative, in terms of the story, you know, all of that, right? It just keeps kind of going, right? And it kind of blew up. And really, here's the thing that's going on with this, because obviously it started with Mainoo. The whole kind of story was with Mainoo about, and then it became like everybody's for sale, yada yada, except a few players. Amad Diallo was a new contract. Lenny Yoro was mentioned by Ornstein, not for sale. Here's the thing, right? I've said time and time again, everyone is for sale if they don't perform and if the right price comes in. That's just the state that United are in financially from this perspective on rebuilding. So is Mainoo, if someone comes up with 30 million for Mainoo, are they going to sell? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But if someone comes with 100 million and he's not agreeing a new contract, probably. Shouldn't they? In that situation? I think so. But the crux of it is they want a new contract with Mainoo. So what does that tell you? They want him to stay. They see him as an important part of the project moving forward. Amorim wants to continue to use him. As I've said before, my assessment of it and my understanding of it is he's viewed as a pretty perfect foil to Manuel Ugarte in that midfield. They obviously want to add more players to it, but as a really good option there to continue developing. They want him to stay. However, there's a couple of considerations here when it comes towards agreeing a new contract with Mainoo. Number one is, really it all comes down to money, but there's factors contributing to that. Number one is that they're completely changing the wage structure, right? So someone who's entering in negotiations on Mainoo's side, from an agent perspective, looks at Antony on 200,000, looks at Rashford getting 350 or whatever, looks at Sancho coming in at a young age and getting 250, looks at all those deals and says, I'm an established English international at this point, played at the Euros, I'm a major part of this team. Shouldn't I be on the same wages that you're giving out to other players in similar situations? The problem is those were not given by Ineos, right? Ineos have only given out, they made the 4 signings this summer. Is it 5? 5 signings this summer. Wow, actually made a lot of signings this summer. The highest wage player that they got this summer was De Ligt on just under £200,000 a week, and they got him to take a fairly significant pay cut to join. And that was because he was already on big wages at Bayern Munich, right? So they're not giving out big contracts. Lenny Yoro is viewed as one of the best center-back prospects in all of Europe, wanted by Real Madrid, and he's on like 115K. That's the new standard. Amad Diallo's contract is a very good benchmark for this, and why it's so important now that it's getting done, because it sets the tone and says, here's a player who's performing, who's a key part of this team, and who's young and who has high potential, and is probably performing better, just saying, than Mainoo at this point in time. Not to have them compete, but point is, you're not finding many players who are more important long-term than Mainoo, right, at the moment, or than Amad Diallo right now, right, who are performing, who are, staples in a team. What's he going to get? What wages is he getting? Well, nobody's said it yet, but he's not getting 200,000, right? It's going to be lower than that, quite a bit lower than that, as I've said before. That will set kind of the bar for what is feasible, for what is the standard moving forward. Very often we've given out wages too much, too early, and all of that. The other factor here, and look, you can get mad at me about this if you want, it's fine, but it's the truth. Mainoo is a really good player, and I've shared many times that I think he's perfect in that midfield. I think he's got to improve certain things, but I think he's a very, very, very good. I think he's excellent. I think he's going to be the right guy. I have nothing but praise for Mainoo, and I want to see him in that starting midfield with Ugarte every week, as I've shared many times. He's not been healthy that much. Mainoo missed half of last season, maybe a little bit more, and a couple months of this season already with injuries. And if you go back to his youth career, he struggled with injuries there as well. It's normal for that to happen with young players. One was a contact injury, obviously, with Casemiro's tackle in the preseason, but it still happened, okay? It still happened. These are still injuries. Mainoo has only played not even yet a full season as a Manchester United player, okay? He's not comparable when you're talking about young guys like Lamine Yamal, who's already in like 2 seasons of tearing things up at his age. And the young players at Barcelona who have won leagues already and are in their, guys like Pedri, et cetera, in like 5th, 6th seasons already. It's crazy, right? How far in their career they are. Mainoo is still very early on in his career, as is Amad Diallo, mind you. And that's why those wages are there. Jadon Sancho, to be fair, was one of the best players in all of Europe for 2 or 3 years before United signed him, before he got those wages, even though it didn't work out. Rashford had been playing for long amounts of time and had essentially carried the team on his back that whole year before that. But, regardless, they want to see the valuation of where he's at, and what he'd be worth wages wise and things like that on a new contract is based on all of these factors. And one of those is health too, that you got to show you can play, because the biggest thing Ineos have valued when evaluating the club at this point in time, where they look at players, is physicality. We've talked about this a lot. That's where they think has been lacking most of all. And physicality is on the pitch, but it's also your robustness, your fitness, all of that. Why do you think they value Bruno Fernandes? Again, I shared this on, the other day, because he can play. He can play so much. And he's easily one of the most physical and fit players at United. Maybe the most, maybe with Manuel Ugarte now. No, but again, that's why they really, really liked Manuel Ugarte. Why Wilcox wanted him so badly. Never gets injured, can play constantly, is extremely fit. This is what they want in players, and they want to see that from Mainoo. That's a part of the value too. You don't want to give $200,000 for a player who gets injured for 2 to 3 months out of every season. Now, I'm not saying that will happen, but that has happened. Okay, so they have to be careful with that as well. They're really doing nothing wrong, but what happened is that you have to realize that in these contract negotiations, obviously a story was leaked about maybe Chelsea or somewhere else and yada yada, because on Kobbie's side, he's unhappy with the offer that was originally made. You can see who he's represented by. And if you don't know what Stellar Group do with media, this is normal play for them, is to put things out into the media like this to link. And it happens with every negotiation. It happens with every deal, prepared to walk away, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And all that happens is then that story runs. And then journalists go to the club and say, what's the deal with this? And what do the club say? The club will say what they have to say, which is that, look, they've got to set their line in the sand too. We're not just going to give a bunch, we're not going to, we're not going to just give out contracts willy-nilly. Anybody's available. So you don't want to agree the contract and Chelsea is asking about you. Okay, well, if you bring a big offer, we'll have to consider the sale. We'll have to, right? I mean, we just have to. That's their stance, and that's what gets published, and that's what goes around, and that's the reality of it. Do they want Kobbie to leave? Absolutely not. Do they want to agree a new contract? Absolutely. Is the most likely by far scenario that they will agree a new contract by end of the season on an extension on reasonable wages? Yes, that is almost assuredly going to happen, right? But it has to be still on their terms. It has to be. They can't bend on these things. They literally can't bend on these things. They have to change the way that things have been being dealt with for so long, and that's what they're working on. And so, that's the biggest factor that's going on at the moment with this, and why these stories kind of blow up and then end up going all over the place because of stuff like that. So it's messy, but it's really not that big a deal. It's going to be okay. Okay, it's going to be all right at the end of the day, and it's going to be fine. That's the truth of it. Now, are there potentially other sales in that could happen than of young players? Yeah, for sure. Alejandro Garnacho, when you compare the two of them in their current situation, Mainoo is starting every week for Amorim. Garnacho is barely featuring right now, okay? And, there have been clubs in Spain that have maintained regular contact with his representatives. There's been interests from both sides in that potentially happening if he was not to move forward. I'm not saying he wants to leave United. I'm not saying they want to sell him. But it's because he's not as nailed on a player like Ahmad, like Mainoo, all of that at the moment. They will be more willing to sell in that case. And the price point for Garnacho is certainly lower than it is for Mainoo at this point in time in terms of what it would take to have them say, yeah, fine, we'll let the player go. He's got to prove himself, to Amorim at this point. And I don't think that at this point he has yet, right? I think Mainoo is on his way, and he's been selected regularly in that starting midfield, as is Ahmad, etc., right? You can see who Amorim really wants yet. There's a number of players who have proven themselves. If a huge offer came in for Højlund, would they accept it? Probably. If a huge offer came in for Xerxes, would they accept it? Yes. That doesn't mean these players want to go. That doesn't mean they're trying to push them out. It just means these are players who have not proven themselves at this point in time. Ironically, which makes me laugh, the first player that United put pen to paper on in keeping longer under Ruben Amorim was Harry Maguire. Isn't that funny? I always catch a lot of stick for my takes on Harry Maguire, but they extended his contract that extra year before doing anything else. It was the first player that they committed to a little bit longer under Ruben Amorim. But regardless, that's sort of the point, is that, they have to, not everybody has committed yet. Not everybody has proven themselves yet. And in those cases, yes, absolutely yes. As with Rashford, as with others, they're open to letting them go. Antony, obviously is somebody who could go. Eriksen is leaving. Casemiro, they want to sell. But including young players, if they have not proven themselves as of yet, doesn't mean they have the same price point. They might be high. They might be difficult to buy. They are open to letting them go. I would say, if you look at a chart of this or a rating of this, actually I have that kind of chart that shows what they rate, where they rate players and all that. You get at the top Leny Yoro, Ahmad, Ugarte, way up there. It would take a catastrophically monumental offer to buy them, right? They're effectively not for sale, even if they're not going to say that, but they effectively are completely not for sale, right? And then you move down a little bit and you've got Maguire, who they probably would sell, but they're completely not looking at it and they'd rather not at this point in time. It's probably not Maguire there because of his age and all of that. But maybe you've got I don't know if there's anybody right below that, but then you've got maybe De Ligt, right, who's well rated. And then you move a little bit and you've got young players who have high potential, maybe are not performing right now. In terms of price point, it keeps kind of coming down as to what they would sell. And in one of these brackets, you've got Højlund and Garnacho and Xerxes and all that in this brackets where they're semi-unproven at this point in time. Højlund is probably a little bit higher of a fee and all that because he's a little bit more. But they're in a kind of bracket like that, right? And then you move to the bottom and you've got guys leaving for free, Lindelof and Evans and Eriksen, and then, Casemiro and Antony, guys that they would definitely sell if they could, right? And so there's just these different brackets, and it's going to be different values, different price points as to what they would sell them in where they would place them and what it would take for them to let them go, as well as, their priority to keep them. And that's just basic stuff. I mean, that's just basic stuff. And it doesn't have to go crazy, on all of that. According to, the contract details, Ahmad will be here till 2030. So 5 years, there you go. That's pretty good. So regardless, just kind of explaining this whole situation because I think it spirals completely out of control. There are, more chances. I mean, I went through a graph of the players that I think are more likely to stay at this point in time, and and are the core foundation. And I showed it's mostly on the right side. Mazraoui, they're not going to sell. He's performing so well for the value they have for him. Mazraoui, Ahmad, Ugarte, Mainoo, they very much want to keep, okay? To be very clear, it's not the point. They want a new contract with him. They want him to be a part of that main midfield. Leny Yoro, De Ligt and Maguire, kind of going to stay. In the keeper side of things, they want to keep Onana, but they want competition. And beyond that, those are probably your higher price point players, or like there's no reason to sell them right now players. And then there's, on the other side, a lot of players who would be available, like Malacia, like Shaw, like, if offers came in for any of the other forwards, frankly, they would consider it more likely because they need to replace them, not that they want to sell everybody. So you just have to understand how it works. It's worth repeating. It's not asset stripping. It's about, doing things right. But even in the instance of these players, if someone offers 100 million for Mazraoui, obviously they're going to sell. It's like, don't be silly, right? And any of those players need to be able to agree to relevant wages and things like that on any contract negotiations in order to stay too. So it's just bears repeating this point. They want to overhaul a lot of players. And yeah, we could see young players like Garnacho leave. We could, but it would take a decent offer. And, it's really all about proving themselves. Some players have already. Some players will be given to the end of the season. And most of these are not likely to have anything happen anytime soon. They'll get at least to the end of the season. And then it's really up to them too. If they want to leave, United will let them go. Moving on to left backs. This is obviously a major priority and an area I wanted to discuss. I've been talking about left backs for ages. Kirkes and Nuno Mendes were in the top of our lists last time. Fabrizio added, that was the case, but that Dorgu was another name that they were looking at that potentially could be cheaper as an expansion to the list. Now, there's conflicting reports at this point in time as to whether they get somebody in January. And all this really comes down to is if they can or not, right? The problem that we're experiencing here is that it's definitely a priority. I've been telling you for months and months and months and months and months that it's a priority, that they're going to get it. But the problem is this balance. Bournemouth don't want to sell Kirkes in January. Nuno Mendes' situation is still up in the air at PSG. It's not totally clear that he's leaving yet. But you've seen reports United are pushing for him. That's true. They've had discussions. They've looked at it. But it's not really certain that they could get something done in January on that. In fact, it's very unlikely. They're both quite difficult in January to get done. So you start expanding your list of options. Aït-Nouri's too expensive, right? We've talked about him. Davies is very unlikely. So you expand to, say, Dorgu. The issue is he available in January? And what would he cost? And can United pay that amount of money in January? With a few moves, they might be able to afford it. But the question then comes down to this. Do they compromise? Let's say that they rate Kirkes and Mendes like way above everybody else. For whatever reason, let's just say. Do they compromise and say, we'll get someone we want less to get them in January because we have an urgent need right now? Or do we make it to summer? I don't know. But my inclination on Ineos in what we've seen so far and some of their concerns over mistakes that have been made, in the past at United, but also by them, is that they probably won't compromise and get who they don't want if they're pretty sure that they can get them in summer on a reasonable fee, if that makes sense. Like, they're not going to maybe save 10 million to get who they don't want or who they want a lot less, a less ideal player, let's say, versus waiting till summer, because it's a long-term project, right? It is a long-term project. So I don't know, right? I don't know if it'll get done. That's always the question. Can they get it done? The more I hear about each individual deal, they've been talking, they've been exploring them, but they're really hard to do in January. And so the only reason they wouldn't sign a left back is not because they don't want one now, not because it isn't a priority, not because they're not looking at it, but because they cannot get the ideal ones that they want in January, and they'd rather not compromise. That's the only reason they wouldn't sign a left back. I still think there's a decent chance we get somebody in, but obviously it's not nailed on. And it's a part of this kind of pickle that we have here in this kind of not wasted season, but in some ways, obviously a really difficult season here where we're already struggling, and you start to look at it and say, do we start compromising on our top targets and on our ideal course of action to try to salvage the season, or do we save as much money as possible, move as many players as possible, and give ourselves the best chance to do what we can in summer? shore up our gains, right? Our Ahmads, get them on new contracts, sort out Kobe Mainoo's, shore up the players that we have, keep training, keep working on, and really nail down our core and move anybody else we can on so that come summer we have a lot of money. Because you have to think about it. If we don't make any significant signings in January, but we move Rashford, we move maybe a couple other players out. We'll talk about Casemiro in the midfield in a minute, because that's another area that has this similar conundrum. And then come summer, Evans, Lindelof, Eriksen leave, Rashford's gone, Antony's gone, Casemiro's gone, maybe Malacia, maybe Shaw, maybe more of Garnacho or Xerxes. The amount of money that opens up, I mean, that would cut the wage bill by practically 40%. Understand it, maybe 50%. It's that significant. And the fees that you bring in, maybe profit in the 100 million range. It would mean United could do practically whatever they wanted in the market at that point in time. I'm not trying to sell a thing here. I'm thinking it through myself and trying to think like I can see that way of going where it's, as long as you don't get relegated, you essentially sacrifice the season. Maybe, again, you could win the FA Cup and get back into Europe that way too. But you could win Europa and get back into Champions League. And I think we technically could, by the way. I still think that's a possibility of one of those. I mean, that's the absolute ideal situation, right? But that's kind of the view a little bit that is going on in the discussion, is that can we just consolidate our gains financially as much as possible while continuing to do the things we're going to do? And there will be more cuts, by the way. There's already more being planned, and there are more happening that were already planned in the beginning, but that are coming soon. But that's part of it. If they cannot get the players they really want, I don't think they'll go down the list too much, right? There's always alternates, but I don't think they're going to drop down too much, and they'd rather consolidate their gains and give themselves the best room financially for summer. But that's the only reason we wouldn't sign a left back, is if that was the case. We cannot get one we really want if they don't rate, and I know they rate Kirkes really highly, and I know they rate Nuno Mendes really highly, but if they cannot get one of those, is Dorgu or one of the alternatives that they could afford? Could they afford them? First of all, are they close enough to that in order? And I don't have the answer to that right now, but I think if they approach clubs and talk about it, then they will find out a little bit more and can make that kind of decision. But that would be the reason we don't get a left back in January. In the midfield, obviously this is another consideration. Is if a club comes in January for Casemiro, there's no guarantees they'll be back in summer. It leaves you quite short if you sell Casemiro in the midfield, but I think you have to do it anyway. And I think that they would strongly consider that. In this case, it's so much money available that potentially it could push them to buying somebody. We know about Ederson. We know they've looked at Adam Wharton. I'm positive there's other names that they've been looking at for the midfield as well. But that's another kind of consideration. If you can't get who you want, you still probably let Casemiro go and go short and just try to solve it with the youth. Maybe you can get Sekou Kone in by the end, in the next few months, to at least covering in some rotation, so that you can save that money and get who you really want in summer to rebuild. But this is an interesting one. Casemiro has interest from the MLS. There's been a lot of talk of Saudi. I haven't seen 100% certainty yet that there's actually an offer for him from Saudi or anything like that at this point in time. I'm not certain of that yet. But if one comes in, obviously United would be willing to let him go and to move him on. And I think that they would. And I think that they would consider being a little bit short. But it's so much money that potentially that would open up the door to getting somebody in the midfield, area at this point in time. So yeah, but that's another one of these questions that they're dealing with right now, is with the financial situation. Do they sell players and go short? And let me know what you think about this, because I've asked people, and most people I've spoken with said, yeah, I'd probably be short. Rather United be short and move on some of these high wage players and big money players and have more spending power in summer than hold on to them and then hope we can sell them in summer, right? That's my thoughts too. Let me know what yours are. It's a really but it is a really difficult situation to claw out of, where financially it's hard to get in the top players in January that you want. Do you move them on and be a little bit short for the rest of the season? Do you compromise on your top candidates and drop down, and how far do you go down, right? Those are all really, really important things that have to be technically considered, at this point in time. So yeah, we got to think about all of that. So let me know your thoughts on those things. I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to make mention of, but I cannot remember for the life of me now. Yeah, I do. I feel like there was one other thing I want to talk about, but I can't remember, at this point in time. Oh, I do remember. So I've been talking for a while in the past about United looking at a lot of young players, right? A lot of young players that they were interested in, that they were considering, a lot of young players that they were sitting there like thinking about, right? Like Rig and Nippon and all these kinds of names. It feels like they've moved slightly away from that, and it just, I get the impression they moved a little bit away from wanting to make those deals for these players who aren't necessarily ready yet, because one, maybe that was more in line with Dan Ashworth's thinking. I don't know for sure that, but I think that it's more a matter of, because things have been so bad, it's so urgent that they get back into competitive position in Champions League that it may be too long a runway to sign those players now. So maybe that concept is more, okay, we still need 4 or 5 really good ones, and then later on, maybe it's a year later, we make moves for younger players. But really, again, that also depends on the finances. If we move on enough, we could sign the starters and those young players underneath them come summer to shore it up and give us a lot of youth underneath their starting 11 to develop and potentially become starter quality players in the future. But it does feel more like it's so urgent that we cannot necessarily just do that like we wanted to maybe before, as a course of action to rebuilding the team, at least at this point in time, and that we need maybe more more starters than we thought originally to come in and be able to play and contribute right away. So just a thought there on that side of it too, because that's part of the impression that I've been getting. So that's what I have for today. Long kind of in-depth summary. I think I'll have a tactical video later today, and then I'll try to do a live tomorrow to run through all this, answer questions, maybe update our charts and things like that too. So thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I will see you in the next video.